We are in the steel and aggregate business mainly, but we have developed a lot of logistics through the years. So we can say that we become a little bit of a specialist in logistics as well.
How long has the company been going?
Here in the States, we've been here for 20 years already. We have changed names sometimes, but right now it's CAL-G. And in Mexico, we have been over 60 years in Mexico. My family came from Spain.
And in the Q&A today, you mentioned that you bring products in from overseas and they into maybe the Port of Brownsville and then export them into Mexico.
Well, that was a question not only for me, but it was also because we're involved in a port, what we call an efficient port that we want to bring into the Port of Brownsville, which is a very interesting project. And we're talking with clients like Ternium and De Acero, which they normally use the port as well. And one of the concerns that a lot of these people have is that the ships that come into Brownsville, most of them come and not trade, they unload in Brownsville and they bring their products into Mexico by train. So the tariffs that Mr. Trump is trying to put in the Chinese-built ships, it's a problem because they're talking about $1.5 million, which will be basically charged to the product. So that might affect the Port of Brownsville because putting $30 on each ton of product might affect tremendously on what the port does for those industries in Mexico today. Part of our project was involving bringing other people that are not finding places where to offload fast in Mexico to bring their product into Brownsville and take it into Mexico instead of taking it to Altamira. Also because of the draft that the port is planning to build not planning, they're already doing it. They're taking it to 52 feet of water. That is going to bring a lot of activity in between Mexico and United States. But if they put that tariff on the bulk carriers, it will most probably affect very much that industry. That's why I was asking the guys that came in from the office of the Governor Abbott if there will be like an exemption on that, because that will help Brownsville to keep on growing. And the trading between Mexico and Texas will keep on growing, because that material is not staying here, it's going into Mexico right now.
I thought, are we talking about steel? Because I thought most of the
Yes.
steel came from Russia.
No, the steel that they're bringing is from Brazil mainly. They bring their slabs from there, and it's like a semi-product to produce coils, to produce beams, to produce galvanized steel. And they bring it from Brownsville, and they bring a very large amount. Today they're bringing 6 million tons and every year, and they keep on growing. So that's only one company. There's other companies trying to do the same, especially as the port gets to that 52 feet, which will take a couple of more years. But I mean, that's why we're planning on investing in the efficient port that I was telling you about. But I mean, if for whatever reason they put that tariff on the Chinese built ships, that's going to affect that very big.
So in the case of that specific company, the raw material is coming from Brazil, but the tariff would be charged because the ship is from China. It's a Chinese ship.
Yes. President Trump is trying to impose a tariff for Chinese-built ships for $1.5 million to come into United States, any port in United States. That has not been talked very much, but that's creating a lot of confusion in the market, and even a lot of the ship owners are trying to avoid coming into the United States until that is not with a certain what is going to happen. Because, I mean, they have to try to give that cost to the owner of the cargo. And on bulk, it's hard because, like I mentioned, those ships that come today to Brownsville are 50,000-ton vessels. So if you put it in tons, that's $30 to add in a product, and that's hard. That is the same with cement. That is the same with with other type of steel, and even with grains that go into Mexico that might come through Brownsville. Today, the most important is the steel out of there. And in my case, I bring a lot of aggregate to the Port of Brownsville for the LNG projects, for the element fuel projects, and other projects that are coming around the Brownsville area. And we will be affected very much because today we sell the product in between $35 to $40. And if you get this tariff on Chinese ships, which, by the way, they represent 60 to 70% of the total fleet of the bulk carriers in the world. So if they do that, that is going to increase another $30 on the aggregate, which it is very much needed for the big projects.
Just run that statistic by me again. A large percentage of those ships are Chinese vessels.
Correct. The
And
Chinese.
it's $1.5 million per ship.
Correct.
The tariff.
Every time that a Chinese-built ship comes into the United States, at least that's the idea from Mr. Trump, is to charge that $1.5 million. So the fleet of the large ships, when I'm saying large ships, we're talking ships like Handymax, Panamax size, and Aframax ships, which it is 50,000 tons or more. And those ships are mainly being done in Korea, China, and Japan. So, of course, there's some in Turkey, but in the United States, it's basically dead to produce those ships. So if they charge that, 70% of the fleet that comes into the United States will have to increase the prices of freight or to give the owners of the cargo to pay for that $1.5 million, which in the case of bulk cargo is a lot of money.
Do you have any idea what percentage of the vessels coming into the Port of Brownsville are Chinese? Is it a high percentage?
Well, I'm just going to throw a number. I don't really have that number, but I can tell you that last week, for example, there were 4 ships that came from Brazil to Ternium, and they were Chinese built. So Ternium
but the tariffs have not been imposed yet, so they're okay.
No. They say that on the 17th of April they're going to say something about it. I read something today that they might pause also until November, but there's no certainty of what's going to happen yet.
It's making it very difficult for your industry you don't have certainty, you don't know what's coming.
Correct, and that's the biggest problem. Of course, hurting the purchasing of those products into the United States is a problem, but the uncertainty also gives us more problems because we don't know what to do. And even the ship owners today, they don't want to quote unless you take the risk on paying for that $1.5 million in case that tariff comes in. So we're very concerned.
So that $30 per ton in additional cost you're trying to pass along, or not you, but the raw material producer is trying to pass that along to the customer in the US, that can make a difference between making that product competitive or not?
Yes. For example, in the case of cement, I'm going to talk about cement. Cement today actually comes in bulk and in super sacks. The price of that cement most of that cement comes from Turkey, Egypt, Vietnam, and the UAE. That cement today comes in about $90 to $95 per ton. If you add $30, you're adding like a 30% more to that product, and there's not enough industry to supply in the area cement. So that's a big problem. That's cement. On steel, same thing. On steel, well, in this case, the steel is going to Mexico, but I mean, it's like a 10 to 15% extra cost just to touch a port. So that's big. And in my case, the aggregate, which is the product that we're bringing actually to the Port of Brownsville, we sell it in between $35 to $39. So it will be almost 100% increase on a material that there's not in Brownsville. We need to bring it out.
That cement, so is it the case then that the consumers, people that go into the hardware store to buy bags of cement, they should fully expect that the price of cement is going to go up across the country?
I think so. For example, Houston. Houston imports a lot of cement. Most of the cement that comes into Houston for road construction, for high rises, for parking lots, um, it comes from outside of the United States, mainly Turkey and Egypt. And that product is going to increase, and it's going to be, of course, passed through the consumers.
Yeah, but only if the ships bringing that cement in are Chinese, surely.
Correct. On that is Chinese, but again, on those ships that are 50,000-ton vessels, 70% of the fleet is Chinese.
I
So,
think
so it will be very hard to find ships from Japan, from Korea, from Turkey that are willing. And even if they come with no tariff, they're going to they're going to increase their prices because there's going to be a big demand for those ships instead of the Chinese ones.
so. The US needs to produce those very big bulk ships rather quickly, so they don't have to be supplied on Chinese ships.
And that's the idea of Mr. Trump, which I think that is good, to try to bring the manufacturing of ships again into the United States. The problem with that is that there is no infrastructure right now to attend that. And it will be, I think that it will be done, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years before you will have that infrastructure. And another down thing on it is that the cost of building ships in the United States, it might be 5 to 6 more times than in China, in Korea, or in Japan. Um, there's so much need of specialized labor like welders that they're not here, that they charge a very large amount of money to do these things. I'm hearing that there's a lot of shipbuilding trying to get into the United States, which will be good for the economy, but I think that's on the long term, not on the short term. And if this comes in, it's going to hit everybody on the short term bad.
I've got an answer for the raw materials coming in from Brazil that are going to the Port of Brownsville and then down into Mexico. But you probably won't like the answer because you operate out of the Port of Brownsville. But those ships could go straight to a port in Mexico, and Mexico isn't imposing huge tariffs on China. So that could be the impact, which would not be good news for the Port of Brownsville.
Correct. The Ternium, which is the company that brings actually those slabs, will be in that position. I mean, they will look for an alternative because it's increasing a lot their cost. And for Brownsville, it'll be very bad because Brownsville is largest client is Ternium. They bring 6 million tons, and they're trying to invest also in a new terminal for bringing raw materials for the new steel mill that they're building in Monterrey. It's called Pesqueria. And that's another 3 million tons. So the port will be hit very bad by losing that 6 million tons per year, not to mention the stevedores that process that, which is an American company called Gulfstream, and others that are in the port. So it might be very bad.
Well, Mr. Perez, those are all the questions I have. Is there anything else you'd like to add about the state of your industry at the moment?
Well, no, I mean, we are very supportive of what Mr. Trump is trying to do, but there's some things that I think that needs to be analyzed on the tariffs because it might hurt, especially this area, which is Brownsville and the Rio Grande Valley Alliance, which is RioPlex, which is what we're doing here today. Which, by the way, I thanks Mr. Spammer to invite me. It has been very nice. And I would also like, taking advantage of you approaching me, is to see if we can have another conversation with you soon in Brownsville to talk about the CAL port, which we call CAL port, the new efficient port that we want to bring there. That's why I was also asking the office of the Governor Greg Abbott, about the Corps of Engineers to see if they can help us to solve issues that we might have with them in terms of time to build this.
Well, thank you, Mr. Perez. I can say this in all honesty. I've learned a lot from this conversation about the situation in your industry. Thank you so much for today's interview.
Thank you very much, Steve.